Alright, we're going to try something new, starting this semester with each turning point. There's going to be a little bit of clip for you to watch to set the tone and set the stage. We're starting with this one today, which is the end of Accommodation, which is the story of Booker T. Washington versus W.E.B. Du Bois and their competing philosophies. So sit back, relax, enjoy, take notes as we begin our look at race relations in America at the turn of the 20th century. So let's start with this. We have to understand that there's two key people here. Booker T. Washington, who's a political activist and an African American activist, and his philosophy versus W.E.B. Du Bois's philosophy. That's what we're going to be studying over the next couple of days, but more importantly, we have to understand some of the context of this. So let's take a look at some things. This all really begins in Reconstruction South, post-Civil War. We've talked about sharecropping. We've talked about tenant farming. There's a new term called debt peonage. The word peon comes from that. Debt peonage is simply people who were in debt to a farmer, in this case, who held control of that person because that person represented labor, and if they couldn't pay up in terms of crop and in terms of working out in the fields, as you can see, out in the cotton fields, this is still alive and well in the post-Civil War South. This is a picture of a family of sharecroppers. This is the condition the Southern blacks are living in. In 1881, Booker T. Washington starts what's known as the Tuskegee Institute, and Booker T. Washington, with the help of a lot of white industrialists, in fact, if you look at this guy right there, that's Andrew Carnegie, and a lot of the white industrialists liked this idea because what Booker T. Washington was saying was simply, let's segregate, let's self-segregate, let's become better learners, let's become better people in the economy, let's become better workers. And when black people can separate and become better workers, and we can prove to the white people essentially that we're just like them, then white people will accept us, and then we can enter into society. That was definitely some self-segregation, which people are going to have problems with within the African American community. This is an example of what it looked like inside of the Tuskegee Institute. You can see all the African American males in a classroom learning about what, I don't know, but that's inside the Tuskegee Institute. In 1900, we have the very first piece we look at later on, which is the Great Migration. And the Great Migration is simply, if you take a look at the percentage of African Americans in the Deep South in 1890, they moved north. And they move up into cities like Detroit and Cleveland and Chicago and Milwaukee and Kansas City and St. Louis. But most importantly, they move up into Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and New York City. In 1905, in a reaction to Booker T. Washington's movement, 1905 you have what's known as the Niagara Movement. And this was a group of African American leaders who gathered together in Niagara Falls, actually in Niagara Falls, Canada, and we'll talk about why. But W.E.B. Du Bois begins this movement against Booker T. Washington's Accommodation movement. Booker T. Washington wanted to accommodate to the white demands, and the people led by W.E.B. Du Bois said no, not now, not ever. In 1908 in Springfield, Illinois, ironically enough the burial place of Abraham Lincoln, in 1908, you have a race riot where the entire African American section of the city was burned. This famous quote that comes out of that from a white community member saying, "Lincoln freed you, now we'll show you where you belong." And then in 1910, as a reaction to that tremendous race violence, a reaction to that tremendous accommodation of Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois and Ida Wells Barnett and a number of different white and African American leaders formed the NAACP, and this was the end of second-class citizenship and the fight for equality. And that debate between W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington began.